fill up the form and pay the fees and become a member of Tamil Nadu Science Park. That's it. So with this, let me ask Dr. T.R. Govindarajan, the founder member. He's going to introduce the speaker. Then the speaker will take over.
Hello. Thank you very much. This is the 91st Popular Science lecture. The first was given by me. So, we have been continuing this work even during COVID when we started online programs. Now, after the COVID period ended, we have come back to the offline and hybrid. We make it available in YouTube, also Zoom, but we would prefer people come here because the interactions will be better with the speaker. Now, the first part is Dr. Geeta is known to me for the past 45 years. She was working in
marine fisheries
in Chennai, and I was in the theoretical physics department of Madras University. We were research scholars, or I was a research scholar. She was probably a faculty or staff in that place. So many of us decided that we should start this Tamil Nadu Science Forum to take science to people, particularly in colleges and other places, so that they become familiar with modern science and research activities which are going on. So this started at that time. Now it has expanded to a very big level. And Dr. Geeta was one of the founders along with me in this program. And she calls herself finally Biologist-at-Large. I don't know what is meant by that. She's a biologist. Okay. After the stint here.
It means I poke my nose in many things.
Okay. So after the stint here, she went to US. She was in Arizona. And after that, she moved to Stony Brook. She was a faculty there in the
Ecology and Evolution.
Ecology and
Evolution.
Environment.
Evolution.
Evolution. And after that, she returned to Delhi University. And she was a faculty in the Botany department and retired from there a few years back. And then after retirement, to come back to the place of origin. And that's what she's doing. She has come here and she will talk to us about this question, which is very interesting. I'm very curious, like all of you, whether Rajaraja Solan or Ponniyin Selvan or Rajendra Solan, all these people, what are the food things they ate? Okay. And they are not vegetarians by any definition. So they must have taken some non-vegetarian food also, hunting, etc. I can think of few of the animals which we must have lost because of them. And it's very curious, what are the spices they added? What are the things to make it? You don't eat raw. So people have to cook and add spices. And many of these things came from outside. We don't know. It's always a curious question. What are the things which people at that stage of their this thing, 1,000 years back, 1,200 years back, what are the food items they had? In fact, many of the food items which we take now were not available. And interestingly, some of the food items which are available in Kerala may not be available here. For example, many of us may not have even heard some 15 years, 20 years back, something called dragon fruit. Okay, something like mangustan. These are all available in Kerala and the hill areas. Now all our markets, at least in Chennai and other places, they do sell. Some of the villages. So there are interesting things. When I go abroad also, I find that some of the fruits and other things which are available in European places, etc., are not available here. And I'm sure after mangoes, the kind of good mangoes which we have, Imam Pasand and this thing, were not available to the Americans or many other Europeans also. Only now it has become available and they have probably started consuming it and probably they are enjoying it. So there are a lot of things do develop by the various processes of people coming to know about somebody bringing it from outside and also something grown here itself. They try out and some of them may be poisonous and they have to find out. So now Dr. Geeta will explain whether Ponniyin Selvan ate Chettinad chicken, or I don't think he ate, but at least our actor Jai, what's his name? Jayam Ravi, he does eat chicken. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Delivering
Oh, she's giving the third lecture in this series. Thank you.
Thanks for that introduction. Good morning to all, and I believe Eid Mubarak as well. Is this on? This is not on.
remote people.
Ah, okay, all right.
No.
So, so I have to coordinate.
On. I switched off.
All right. So please tell me if I'm too loud. Okay, so I'm not. So the question is, of course, okay, why Chettinad Chicken, why Ponniyin Selvan or Raja Choran, as Govindarajan prefers to say. Well, why not, right? I mean, you have to pick on something, and we can't look at the whole world in at all times to address the questions that we would like to address. And so this is the reason. So this is not working.
If it is not audible.
Move பண்ண மாட்டேங்க. என்னாச்சு இதுக்கு?
I'm just checking it.
Also, your voice is not audible there.
It's not audible?
Closer.
Okay.
That's the better level.
So
Move on.
So is the tomato indigenous to India? The answer is no. Where did it come from? It came from the Americas. Now, this may be something that many or most people here are aware of, but why is it a question? So what you could ask is, why did it have to come here? Why can't you have two species in two different places at the same time, even if it were long, long ago? All right, so the answer to that question is that, okay, so can't two species live on two distant continents? And the point is, the answer to that comes from the work of these two people. The one on the right, you probably know who that is. Darwin. Who's on one on the left? Yes. So he usually gets the short shrift in this, but he actually was very much instrumental in developing the theory of evolution. And the point that they make is that today's species descended from yesterday's ancestors. So that raises another question. So what? They could have arisen independently in these two different places. Now, that sort of takes back the question of where did that ancestor come from? Now, you can have members of the same family live on two different continents, but we would never say that they originated independently in these two continents, right? So it's the same notion, right? That if there is ancestry, that ancestry must have been located somewhere at any one time. And then if you find the descendants in two different places, then it's a question. So what do we mean exactly by this? Point is that species are continuous through time. Where since they arise, they are, this wasn't working. Okay. So way back in time, we had some ancestor, and these figures that you can see holding hands are the two are generations, successive generations. It's just figuratively. And each generation is connected to the previous one by the genes that it inherits from that previous ancestor. So the ancestor transmits these genes and passes them on. So we have this long chain of genetic information being passed down, obviously not in simple manner. We are not going into the processes that are involved in this. But the point is that the tomato ancestor then gives a tomato descendant, right? Whom we see today. At that time, the ancestor would have looked very different from the tomato descendant today. At that time, it would have been different from what it is today. But so similarly, you have human ancestors, and we are the descendants of this long lineage of populations. Okay. So the point is that if no population migrates, right, then all the ancestors and descendants, the entire lineage will stay in the same place. It will stay where it was originated, and it won't be able to go anywhere if it does not migrate. So that's the point. That's why place is important. It's not wanting to. Okay. So it is continuous in time and space. So this is not cooperating. Okay, next one, please. So species arise and they remain where they arose. So they evolve and they remain where they evolved. Okay. So a species could occur on many continents, right? If there are no barriers to movement, so let's say a species, I should qualify that. If there were a species born here, it could occur on multiple continents if there were no barriers to movement from this continent to the other continent. And if the individuals or seeds can actually migrate, because that's a very important thing. Are they capable of migrating? Next. So when we look at human descendants, human ancestors, I've inverted this next one. So that unlike the other one, the past is down here and the present is up here. And if we follow the human populations across the world, their movements through time, then we see there was an origin in Africa and multiple branches of the populations moving out because they were able to move. How long they took is a different matter, but they did manage to reach practically all spaces on Earth. Next. So if there are no barriers and no population migrates, then ancestors and descendants, the entire lineage will stay in the same place. So imagine what would have happened if Africa were an island, distant from everything else. All human beings would have been confined to Africa. And the world as we know it today would have looked very different. It would probably be much greener and redolent with animals and plants and so on. Okay, next. All right. So can individuals, next. Can individuals of the same family, or genus live in two continents? Yes, if one of them migrates to the other. So I'm putting it very basically and simply because sometimes we forget these basic, inferences that we have to make. Okay, next one. All right, so then you have continuity of many species, right? So you have a descent from a common ancestor, and this is due to phylogenetics, or what we call, but it is a genetic process. So if way back in time, that ancestor we are looking at was a tomato-potato ancestor. Okay, next. Then the tomato and potato arise and exist today because at way back in time, sometime, they split off from that ancestor through a speciation event, and we form a tomato and a potato, tomato, potato, tomato. So the tomato and all of its relatives are represented by that figure name tomato. Okay, next one. So similarly, there was a chimp human ancestor way back. Next. And today we have the human and the chimp who came from a divergence. So same deal, right? So there's a split in the lineage. And the question is where the descendant lineages are, where you find them, where do they move at all, etc. Okay, so let's invert this upside down again, as we did for the single lineage. So we have the chimp human ancestor, and here are the descendants. Next one, please. Okay, next. So there was an ancestral species. Let's just imagine what happened. It's easier to visualize it like this because we represent evolutionary relationships as an erect tree. Mathematicians like to draw it like this, but biologists have decided to do it like this. So that's the way it is. But drawing it anyway doesn't matter. Drawing it like this, like this, like that, all the nodes are connected. I mean, the tips are connected to the same node. So the relationships will stay the same. So the ancestral species speciates, by which we mean it forms new species. And so similarly, it just goes on next and next. So there are two descendant species. One of the descendant species may or may not speciate, so that the next. So, right. So at this point in time, there was no new species in this lineage, and so this is how you form next. Form a phylogenetic tree. And in fact, you find this figure in Darwin's notebooks, where he's thinking obviously of what happens when these splits go on and things like that. Okay, next. Next. So many species may descend from one ancestor, right? They can migrate, but there may be barriers to movement, right? So closely related species will stay together, will stay close together. And this is what Alfred Wallace was primarily responsible for. During his explorations around the world, he came across these distinct groups of species, especially in the Southeast Asian islands, Indonesia and so on. And please don't jump ahead, otherwise I get distracted. Okay, so he formulated this idea, there are these distinct groups of species. Next. And you can very broadly class them, as he did, into these different groups of species, which are called biogeographic regions. Next. And next. So each biogeographic region contains closely related species. Next. And each species group is different from other such species groups. So that's how you have these different biogeographic regions, because there were some species that arose here. And because Australia is an island, they tended to stay there, most of them. And they are quite, the flora there is very different from the flora in Africa or parts of Asia or America, right? So that's how you know that these are distinct regions. Next. And just as a sort of a footnote, endemic species don't migrate at all, or they migrate very little. Either they are not able to migrate, whatever it is, there are many reasons, and they may just stay where they arose. Okay, next. So let's take the example of eucalyptus, which many of you are familiar with, which is native to Africa. Australia. But it's so ubiquitous here because the British took it into their heads to introduce it all over the place because they wanted quick growing timber, which of course also sucks up a lot of water. Okay, next, please. What about cultivated plants? Similarly, next, please. Vavilov came up with this through his explorations, an agriculturist, early geneticist. Of course, you may have heard of his persecution by the Stalinist folks, but he left a body of literature and body of work that's much larger than what we mostly know about. And one of the things he did was to identify these biogeographic groups of wild relatives of crop plants. Next, please. So, so this is a problem going from Macintosh to PC. All right, so if you can see this, there are these little groups, right? Those are where the groups of related, so these are the different centers of diversification, of domestication, not diversification, domestication. So he identified these particular groups, which are circled in those maps, as centers where certain groups of plants were domesticated because the peoples there actually managed to do that. So there are centers of domestication. Yeah, next, please. And the tomato, this map would have been down here and the tomato would have been up here. Lots of wild species of tomatoes are found there. Let's hope the next one is okay. Yeah. All right. So here, as we can see, there are tomatoes in South America, which are many species, actually. This is just one group of these tomato-related species. And I'm sorry, I think that's my phone. Just a minute. I thought I shut it up. The travails of technology, right? Sorry. So Yeah, so there are wild relatives of tomato, most of whom have very small fruit. 20 millimeters is the scale here. So very small fruit, all green. And then there's a group of like 5 species. This is the tomato itself that we know. And these are the wild relatives, very close wild relatives of tomato, which still are small, but little, there's a couple of them are a little larger than the others, and they ripen, they become red on ripening. Closer to the tomato that we know. Next. So now you can read a phylogenetic tree, I think. So here are these red colored species. They are all much closely related, more closely related than they are to the other species. Why? Next. Because they share a most recent common ancestor. That's how you read that tree. So this is the common ancestor from which all of these things descended. And then one of them, the tomato, was transported to the rest of the world. Okay, so that's how the tomato made its way to our part of the world. Next. So there are historical records of tomato. So we don't have to guess, although people would still want to do that. But yeah, you don't have to guess. There are historical records. Yeah, next, please. So in 1680, there was a record in the Philippines by the scientist called Rumpius. Next one. In 1782, we had Jefferson trying to persuade people that they should cultivate tomatoes, and there are stories of Americans really resisting. They thought it was poisonous, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And then by 1812, it has made its way into India, thanks to the British, who by that time had acquired a taste for it, I guess. And it's interesting that, for instance, in Bengal, it's called Vilayati Begun. That means foreign eggplant or brinjal. In 1921, it is recorded as being cultivated in Madras Presidency. Gamble was a flora of that, wrote the flora. In 1920s, and this is from personal communication from my family, it was called Seeme Takkali. We had a thing that we call Takkali down here, right? So people recognize that it looks like the Takkali, so it's a Seeme Takkali. Like the Bengalis called it the Vilayati Begun, we called it the Seeme Takkali. I guess that Seeme got dropped pretty soon. So now we don't know whether the Takkali was original or what it was. So people think, oh, we have a Tamil name for it, so it must be from India. And then in the 1920s, again in a letter within the family, there was somebody who remarked on this new vegetable that was there in the market in Kodaikanal. So very recent. It's not so entrenched in our cooking as you might think. Next. Okay, so let's look at a few other examples. Milahu. Now, just in case I need to jog your brains, which my brother actually suggested might be a good idea, but you're quite a young audience. And I guess you're not so far away from your biology such as it was. But we have these larger groupings called families, within which there are genera, and within that there are species, right? So the species in this case would be Piper nigrum, which is the Milahu. And then it belongs to the genus Piper, the family Piperaceae. So look at the distribution, natural distribution of the genus. So all over the world. So how do you know where it was domesticated, right? Next. Well, we know that it was domesticated in Kerala, although the Q website, which is where this is from, wants to talk about it as India because it's a national delimitation they have, but it's in India, in Kerala. And next, how do we know? Next, the closest relatives of the Piper nigrum, are found in the Western Ghats in Kerala. Right? Next. And the wild forms in Kerala are in the forest. And therefore, the inference is that the pepper was domesticated in Kerala. Because all the closest relatives, as well as the wild forms of the pepper, are found in the forest. Okay, next. So, yeah, next. So the domesticated pepper differs from the wild pepper in the way it forms flowers. Now, I didn't put it down there, but maybe just to tell you that different kinds of flowers are formed in the two different species, in the two different forms. In the wild form, the male and the female flowers are found on the same plant. which therefore, next, makes it much easier to cultivate. Okay, because unless the male flower is very close, can carry the pollen to the female flower, the fruit will not form, which is what the pepper is. It's not just a seed, by the way, it's a fruit. Okay, so these are the clues that we have to, don't jump. Okay, it's all right, it's all right. So these are the clues that we have and how you go about doing the detective work that's needed. So a lot of field work in the field, a lot of difficult taxonomic work, and various such, and then about how the domestication, whatever we might know about it. It's not known in detail as far, it's not very only vaguely known how the domestication happened. Yeah, next. Okay, so clove. Syzygium aromaticum. Syzygium, this genus, is distributed only in the so-called Old World. It's not there in Americas. Next, please. Whereas Syzygium aromaticum, next, is found next. It's introduced in all these places, but it was originated only in one island in the Indonesian island group, which is called Molucca. Molucca, various names, Moluccas. And that is the one that the Dutch fiercely, kind of put on a monopoly on. They didn't want anyone else to get there to get at the cloves, which are so this thing. So, but from there, finally, it has been. It's a small tree, which for a long time was difficult to cultivate. But now, apparently, now we can grow them. They grow. It grows in including parts of Africa and other parts of Indonesia and India, in Kerala, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu, in the hilly, wet parts. Next. Okay, so just one more example to quickly go to the next part. So Elysium is a genus that has a very interesting distribution. It's found in the Americas and in this part of East Asia. Now the question is, where was the, you may or may not be familiar with the spice called star anise, but it looks very pretty. It's called Anasipu in Tamil. And next. In fact, it's found only in China. And probably even now, a bulk of it is imported from somehow from those parts of the world. There have been attempts at cultivation, and I'm told that they're not very successful in that the quality is not as good. But probably some parts, including in Kerala, it's been cultivated. Okay. Yeah. So to summarize what we've, yeah.
For the star anise, since I can't think of even using continental shift and all. The continental
Yeah, what was that?
And they,
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm afraid I don't know the answer, but there are possibilities. Not likely, because these are dry seeds, but we can answer that. I'll answer that question at a later point. I don't know the answer. I can speculate. No, but it's possible that there was a, can we go back? Very often when you have such what are called disjunct distributions between North America and Asia, it's because there used to be a continuous distribution, climate changed, and then the survivors. So here you see it's all in the more warmer regions. And so that's the more likely explanation. But good question. Yeah. Okay, so what have we discussed so far? That evolution happens, species evolve one at a time, at one time. That is, two species. Speciation happens at one time in the same place, in one place. And closely related species remain together unless they move or are moved to some other part. So any one of the species could move this way or that. Okay. Now, so which species are used by people? Right? One is, next, depends on where they live. And that is really, sorry, I turned it off. Okay. And that is related to the question of the point that the species, closely related species, stay together. So if the species evolved in the place where you live, then its wild relatives and itself, you would find it right there. So it depends on where the people lived. So the they here refers to the people, or I suppose to both. By the people you're thinking of, did that species live here? And did it live at the time, right, that we are talking? And that's because the movement of species, if it involved movement, can be quite variable. Okay, so now I think we're ready to ask the big question, right? So could you make chicken chettinad? So I'm not going to expound about what they ate. I can tell you a little bit about what they could not put in chicken chettinad, this particular recipe of chicken chettinad. I realize, so questions on, oh no, you don't put this, that, and the other, very, let's say, idiosyncratic, but let us say I've just taken this one particular recipe and this is what I'm going to talk about. So there's some other ingredient that you think should be there, we can talk about it later. Okay, so sort of the bulk ingredients if you want. Here's a list of them: chicken, garlic, onion, curry leaf, coconut, lime, tomato, oil, salt. There's cardamom, yelaka, cinnamon, patte, pepper, milahu, turmeric, manjal, ginger, inji. Tejpat is called birinj yelai, I think, but it may or may not be used. Kramb is clove. Kotamali, of course, coriander. Cumin is jeera. Fennel seed is saunf. Poppy is kasakasa. Lichen is kalpasi. Star anise is anasipu, and red chilies is mora. Okay, so the question is, I think it's behaving itself. Let's do this. We don't know, we now have some sense of where these originated. Okay, and we'll be revisiting the slide again, but just to sort of tell you, chicken was probably Southeast Asia. Garlic, we'll look at that in a bit detail. Garlic is Central Asia. Onion is Central Asia. Curry leaf is South Asia, actually Northern India, foothills of the Himalaya. Actually, this is wrong. I'm sorry. That has to go. That was a mistake, typo. The coconut is Southeast Asia and the Pacific Island, far Southeast Asia. Tomato is South America. Oil, multiple different oils depending on where people lived. Salt is also sources. Of course, that was a very important factor in economy at one point in time. Cardamom is South Asia, Kerala. Cinnamon is Sri Lanka. The really flavorsome cinnamon is Sri Lanka. These are places of origin, not where they are found today. Turmeric, manjal is from Kerala. Inji is also Kerala. The cassia, the more commonly available cinnamon that we have, the flat patte and the leaves that we use, is in different parts of India. There are different species and all of varying quality, and that's that. Okay, cloves are from, as we already saw, from island in Southeast Asia. Coriander and cumin are basically in Southwest Asia. By Southwest Asia, I mean what's called West Asia. The sort of Iran and a little more west of that. Fennel has a more wide distribution from the Mediterranean extending into the western part of Asia. I think of what they call Europe and Asia as one continent. In my mind, it is one continent. So Europe would be West Asia, actually. Yeah. In the Chola times, yes, that's right. Yeah, actually, yes. In fact, I had Kerala there. I don't know why I removed it, but yeah, you're right. Yeah. Kasakasa is also from West Asia and Mediterranean. Lichens are local. The Kalpasi, star anise we saw is from far away, and red chilies. Okay, next. Oh, wait, I'm doing it. So how do we know all this? We did get some hint of it, but basically, just to remind you, it's not just easy knowledge that now we can just go and look up all this literature, but it involves centuries and centuries of documentation in different languages, diverse languages, not documentation, but at least mentions. Documentation can be of different degrees. So mentions are there, and those are good clues to find out. Difficult, tedious, frustrating work in the field, exploring, understanding what the taxonomy of those creatures is, doing the phylogenetic analysis, analyzing it in evolutionary terms, doing archaeology to detect old remains, and history, human historical records. So they're standing now on shoulders of many, many giants, some of whom are known, but most are unknown. And there is still much that's unknown and incompletely known. So what do we know? We might have some idea that cardamom, pepper, turmeric, ginger, and cinnamon are actually from, the first 4 are from Kerala. Cinnamon is from Sri Lanka. Now I have to add one little this thing. Okay, if it were available to people in India, it would have been very, very expensive. It would have had to have been imported. And many of these other spices, I have no idea, maybe some of you do, of how widely they might have been used. What we do hear about the poor people is that they just had kanji, right? And maybe some, I don't know what to add to the kanji to ameliorate the taste. So we have to keep that in mind. Curry leaf was available. Why do I keep turning this off? Okay. So coming to coconut has always been available for a long time. Clove, we said it becomes available. Lime, chicken, they're all from outside India. So they have to have made their way into India at some point. Similarly, yeah, interesting. Yeah, this was part of my discovery during this talk. So coriander, cumin, as we said, are from the Mediterranean and closer regions, and garlic and onion. So what do we know about and tomato and chili, of course, and star anise were quite distant. So were these ingredients available in the 10th century AD? And just a notation about the dating. I forgot to mention here, this is the way we now say AD is, so this century AD would be century Common Era or CE, and the before Common Era becomes BCE. Okay. So we look at in a little bit of detail the history of some of these ingredients. We can't do the whole thing. For that, you'll just have to spend many hours here, and you'll pretty much scrape the bottom of my knowledge base. So chicken, there are 4 closely related species: Gallus gallus, Gallus soderati, Gallus lafayette, and Gallus varius. Now, where are they found? They are distributed like this. So the colors of the areas where they are found is colored according to the species we are talking. So red, the predominant one is Gallus gallus. That's when we say found, we say the wild fowl are found in these areas. Okay. In India, in the northeast, we have Gallus gallus, but in the rest of India, we have Gallus sonerati. Now, some of the earliest archaeological finds had been in India in the 1400 to 1000 centuries BCE, which means more than nearly 3000 years ago. And it was thought for a long time that it had been domesticated in India. Now, maybe kind of supporting that, we don't know. There are some finds in these amphoras in Arikamede of chicken bones. Now, the problem with chicken bones is that you have to carefully identify them because they might be the wild fowl, they might be the domesticated fowl. So we are not sure exactly, but supposedly the finds and this was in Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh actually, where the oldest chicken bones were found. Supposedly they have identified it to the species, that is, it is the domesticated form. Okay. Now, more recently, an much older find was found in archaeological find in Thailand. So, all right. So, does this mean that the chicken was domesticated in Thailand? It's reasonable because there are wild species of the fowl there, but so there was a phylogenetic analysis, taxonomic combined with, phylogenetic analysis done, where you find that all these different species of subspecies of Gallus gallus. So there are multiple, it's highly variable all over. It's such a wide distribution, it's not surprising they have differentiated in those regions. And all of them are actually descended from a common ancestor. And you find that the domesticated form is actually more closely related to the form, the wild form that is found in the Thai region rather than to the Indian region. I'm not showing you those details here. But given all that, it seems to be the case that the domestication actually happened in Southeast Asia. And there was, it was transported across to India, to South Asia. And probably what they say is that hybridization happened in these areas of overlap, but also of the domesticated fowl that were brought over here. And they were local fowl that is there. And those would have been interbred. And therefore, apparently the yellow feet of the chicken is the predominant thing, is a trait from the Soneratia. Okay. Interestingly, some of the Sangam poems actually mention house hens and house roosters. And they mention jungle fowl. Now, whether the jungle fowl were, Sonorati, and whether the house hens were the already domesticated one, or whether they were domesticated here separately, we have no way of knowing. But given the dates, which is, say, 3rd century or whatever, it's very likely that the domesticated form had made its way, was being consumed. Now, I couldn't find any trace of its being consumed. They talk about how frightened the hens are and things like that. My source is one very kind person has translated a whole bunch of these poems and into English online, and maybe there's something hidden there that I couldn't find. So next is Geeta, cumin. So cumin, again, cuminum has a distribution. I forgot to point this out, but I think you've all got this, that the green is where it originated and the purple is where it was introduced. So cumin is found in Central Asia, Western Asia, and part of Africa. The cuminum species, Cuminum cyminum, is found in this region, which actually abuts in including Afghanistan and abutting Pakistan. There's supposed to be some regions of Pakistan where it might be discovered. So it's pretty old, these, well, let's just go to the next one. So when you look at this region in a little more detail, what do we find in terms of archaeology? We have archaeological finds in Balochistan, which is this part that has moved. Sorry, it would be here. I'm sure the Baluchis would be very upset with me, but it should be here. Yeah, somewhere that side. Yeah, that's right. It is found in an old, not so old, but sort of Kushan period thing in Pakistan called Sangol. And it is referred to in Sanskrit literature, but there they don't call it Jeera, they call it all these Ajaji, Karavi, Kuchika, different names. And the Jeera itself is a later name that was probably derived from Persian. And the thought is that the widespread use of Jeera in this region is because of the Persian trade, etc. That might have been, well, we don't know exactly. I mean, it started early, but whether the Jeera was traded right then or not, I don't have any information. No. There's also one very late inscription. There may be more. I just know of what I mean, I can just tell you what has been published. So in the 11th century, that means later than Ponniyin Selvan, in a temple. So these temples have these inscriptions where they list all the donations that were made for Naivedyam. And this one contains cumin. But the earlier inscription, I think in 9th century or something, does not, no reference to cumin. So we don't know whether it had already come to the southern part of India. But you might all have some notions of how important cumin is in our food. Maybe it's not always been so important, right? Pongal, can you make pongal without cumin? maybe not. And these things are actually about recipes, not recipes. You can infer the recipes, but they're donations for making pongal, the temple's inscription. Okay, so the final example that we'll go into like this, capsicum annuum, which is chili. So this is, oh, I forgot to do that. Okay, this is the green chili that we're all familiar with, and we can't imagine that India could have ever lived without its chilies, because there are so many kinds of chilies all over the country. Just enormously, I mean, just from different highly pungent, potent to pretty mild and so on, right? Depending on the local tastes, they have been bred. And equally, there is this Purandaradasa who sung about it. I don't know whether we can actually get this to sing. Either click பண்ண முடியுமா? வருமா அது? In the, yeah. It's called Manasinakai in Kannada. So he goes into a whole rhapsody into it. We'll just listen to the next line. It's really funny. You eat it with roti. So it was there, right? I mean, we have such a history of this thing. But in fact, there's much more variety in South America. And when we look at the, wild relatives of the chili, they're all in Americas, in the southern part of North America, Central America, and South America. So the rest, the chilies you find everywhere else are introduced. Okay. Now, when you look at the species, as you can see, there are different species groups, some of which are more widespread than others. Some are not as widespread, right? Remember the species groups. So these are the, now as it happens, of these species groups, there were two groups, this green colored one and the yellow colored one, the Baccata group and the Annuus group, which actually formed the original group of species from which the chili was domesticated. So historical record on this. It's fantastic. It's supposed to be the fastest moving object across the globe, maybe apart from internet communications. So, Columbus, of course, went to 1495, but by 1500s, it had been transported right across the globe, right? And in fact, apparently the Japanese may well have introduced it to Mexico because so what was it about the chili that was so, why was it adopted so bad? Well, there may be two factors. Pepper doesn't grow everywhere. It needs really humid, moist places. And maybe it was still expensive then. I don't know. If somebody knows that, it would be nice to know. Maybe in the 1500s, it was still expensive and not widely available. But green chilies can be grown, as we know, all over very many different places and might have become more accessible. But 50 years is quite a record. But then these grow very fast. Within a couple of years, you can have your harvest. I mean, planting and harvest. So when you look at the dates, Vasco da Gama comes to India in 1498. Chilies follow pretty rapidly after that. And Purandaradasa lived exactly during that period. And he must have been a babe, very small boy when when the chilies came, but apparently he must have become very fond of it and he sang about it. Okay, so if we can summarize what we know so far, we can think that pepper, turmeric, ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, curry leaf, and coconut were there because there are actually references to it in the Sangam literature. one supposedly, some that have been mentioned by K.T. Achaya was a food historian from whom a lot of this I have taken. Now he says it's there, cinnamon and cardamom. I couldn't find any traces of it, but I was afraid to sort of document that because I need to look more carefully. What about the other ingredients? We have seen that the chicken was probably domesticated in Southeast Asia and made its way here, but quite early. Cumin also probably may have been there. I'm just giving it a benefit of doubt. We're talking 10th century, right? Lime and clove. Well, I haven't yet come to the 10th century, but yeah. Lime and clove. Lime, there are, okay, so lime is very confusing taxonomically. There's lemon, there's lime, and there are various kinds of citruses which can be confused enormously. And it's very difficult if just an archaeological record is there as to know which species it was. So without being too particular, we can say that there was some kind of lime or lemon in, because it's very widespread in India. It must have been there in India all along. Clove is another kind of a bit of a mystery. Charaka in the 3rd century BCE, I'm sorry, that is a mistake as well, has referred to clove, Ella. And there was, well, we have record of well-established trade with Lanka, through Lanka in the 7th century. But equally, by the 3rd century, we know we have other kinds of records of its being traded. So it's very likely that cloves were there all the time. Now, coriander and saunf, poppy seed, kasakasa and saunf. Coriander, there are some old records again in Balochistan. By the 1st century BCE, Persian trade had started. In Sanskrit, as we said, we didn't say, but in Sanskrit, it's called dhanyaka. But later, it also adds this thing called kustumbira, which supposedly is derived from an Akkadian word, Akkadian being a now extinct language, which was, prevalent at that time. And so it's reasonable to think that that word came with the Persians, which might further support the idea that cumin was a much later advent in this part, because southern India has adopted, the Tamil group of languages have adopted the Kustumbira, Kutumili. So also in Maharashtra, it's Kutmir. They don't use dhania. Okay. Fennel, that is saunf. What I have found records of is that there is record of Arab trading it. It may have made its way earlier, but it's not clear. Now, poppy is the strange thing. There is some very old, going back to 3000 years BC, records of it in northern India. Whether it was the same, whether it was widespread then for cooking and for other purposes, I don't know. Historically, I don't know what might have happened, but it's reasonable to assume. So I put my doubtful things in either pale yellow or bordered by gray, just to say that indicate, I can't say absolutely it was there. Oh, I forgot this. Garlic and onion. Again, no mention of its use in cooking in Tamil, but they talk about ulli known mudal. That is, they're describing a bed apparently, which has these legs, which have the lower part is like a garlic. The same word ulli is used for onion and garlic. So that is it. Now, Achaya again remarks that people, in all these records, they didn't talk about ulli, garlic and onion, because it was, not something that Brahmins would eat. And therefore, that explains why it was not, but it was mentioned in the medicinal context by Charaka for its value. So it's very possible that it was widespread and used quite widely, and therefore it was probably. So I put it in very confidently as having been there. The other two are much simpler. We do know, at least tomatoes and chilies we know are not there. Star anise is still a mystery. I haven't found any references to when and where, how it was. But given that it's still being imported mostly or grown locally only recently, it's likely that it was not there. Okay, so this kind of summarizes all the stuff with the caveats and so on. And we won't spend a lot of time on it because I don't know what the time is. Do we have some? Okay. So given all of this, could you have made this recipe of Chettinad chicken in the 10th century? Not if it must have tomatoes, chilies, star anise, maybe saunf and maybe poppy seeds also. But maybe not. Maybe it was there. So it would have been a very different kind of this thing. Probably they must have used tamarind. They might have used, yeah.
In the sour taste.
Yeah. Nowadays, of course, tomatoes are not sour at all, so it's no use. Okay, so the question then is, could you have made it in the 1st century, sort of in the middle of the Sangam period? Could you have made this recipe? So here it starts getting more murky. Let's say that garlic, onion, curry leaf, and all of these spices, clove, coconut, and chicken were probably there. We are not sure about lime, but some version of lime was there, some lemon lime version. What is recorded in the Sangam literature, at least what I found, at least, is Nartanga, which is the whatever, I don't know what the English word for it is. It's Citrus medica for anyone that wants to know. And there's some wild species of lime that is compared, whose scent is very beautiful and is described in that context, but no other mention of any other kind of lime. Yeah, so the other things were not there, probably not. And so if it must have some poppy seed, star anise, tomatoes, chili, you couldn't have made it. Nor even if it must have had coriander and cumin, but that's still questionable. It's maybe not. So basically the summary is the same as we had earlier. That species evolve, they stay in the same place, one time, they stay there unless they are moved. Either they move, they spread out. Because when we show the distributions of species, remember that it originates in one place, in one area, in a population, and that population spreads out, and that's how the species establish itself in that whole area. Yeah, it doesn't, when I show the places of origin, it didn't mean they just arose suddenly in the whole widespread area. It means they arose one place and then spread out. But they were limited by other, climatic and other factors before and could not spread further. People didn't like their taste, whatever, they didn't like their look. So the species that were used then were dependent on where the people and the species lived and when the species became available, whether they could be cultivated if they've developed a taste for it. And I think the red chili is the classic example of that clearly people loved it. By the way, I didn't mention capsaicin is actually something that has neuroreceptors. I mean, it binds with neuroreceptors in the brain. And so actually it makes you so have you ever noticed how you're eating some snack you can't stop eating, which has chilies in it? It's not just because you go, but equally your brain is telling you go on, eat, maybe. Yeah. So these are some of the sources. I have had comments from various people. Like I said, Achaya was a great source, but it hasn't been kind of reevaluated in the context of what we know in terms of plant history and evolutionary information, etc. But there's a lot of information in all these places. And so I've said this all the way through, but just to tell you, this is my, I'm sort of trying to say I'm not a historian nor am I a student of Tamil. I know a little bit of plants and plant history and evolution. So if there are any things missing, wrong, etc., I'd be very happy to get your think on it. And thank you so much for your patience. I had keep this up.
An excellent talk. We want to give a gift. Okay, on behalf of the library, or
No.
will you a memento? Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You didn't mention anything about onion.
I did.
Chettinad chicken without onions?
That I did mention onions. I said very likely they had come on because they were not mentioned in the.
Ponniyin Selvan had only a poor quality chettinad chicken. Many of the ingredients missing.
At least some.
Only we had only tamarind and chicken.
No. The other spices were there. Ginger, important. So I think we used to eat.
Spices.
If you could afford it, you could eat quite well, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
You could steal it.
Yeah.
From Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we go for
That's okay.
some question answer session. And please raise your hand. I will ask one by one, please.
I got two questions. One is, we see that the chili is actually originating from the Americas, but we also see there is this one chili called as the Bochokia, the red ghost peppers. They are originating from Bangladesh and the northeast. So, is there a possibility that the Ponniyin Selvan would have eaten those?
No, firstly, that thing of that they originated, if I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, that highly pungent chili is what you're talking about. I don't think it originated in that part of the world. We think it, I mean, many people think it does, but that's not what the science shows. We can talk about it later if you want, but that's not generally the case. It's not generally thought to be the case. So therefore, it was actually came across from maybe from China, maybe from south from the southern part. So no, Ponniyin Selvan could not have accessed it.
So the next question would be, all these wild, how did they actually get domesticated or cultivated? How did humans actually known for the fact, okay, we can use pepper or you can use cinnamon? How did the technology came?
So pepper is a great example because it turns out that the tribal peoples in that part of the in Kerala, actually collected, and they've collected it for a long time from the wild plants. It was clearly by then when, by that time agriculture had become a practice. So somebody must have had the bright idea of let's try growing it. I think that's how agriculture or domestication always happens. You like something very much, you store it, you want more of it, you want to be able to have it without having to go to the jungle and, deal with all the wild creatures out there. So you try to grow it. So that would, but exactly how that happened, it all depends on the plant, I mean, the crop that you're talking of, or the, cattle and so on, that are chickens and so on. So each one would have a different story. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Somebody else wanted behind? No. Okay, go ahead after that.
So I have seen a variety called tomatilla.
Mhm.
So that's very much available in
Ah,
South America.
Tomatillo is one of those wild species that are.
Yeah, it is wild species, I have seen in my district. It is very small, but
Ah.
they are eating in Mexico.
No. That one is different. It's not the same as the tomatillo that you find here, unless it has been brought here. And these things can also.
And you can
Yeah. That is Physalis. That's a different genus. It's not so. This is Solanum. I forget what the tomatillo is called. I forget the.
exactly, I've seen the same thing in India. How come it comes?
No, that's what we're saying. It's not the same thing. It's probably not the same thing. The one that has this complete cover and this thing, that's a very standard. I mean, okay, not standard, but it appears again and again in this large group called the Solanaceae, that family. The calyx, which is the lower outermost part of the flower, often persists. So that thing that persists in the brinjal and so on, the leafy thing on top. So that persists. And sometimes it grows out and forms a thing. So this kind of trait can actually evolve again and again. So most probably what you're talking of is something like that.
Sodakku takkali okkitu.
Ama.
So that is-
Ama.
It's not tomato.
I know, it's not. Yeah.
Somebody else want?
That person in the glasses,
So, good afternoon. It was really a good talk. I really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. So, I have basically a lot of questions, but not about.
Ask one question.
Yes, one question, two questions.
About the talk.
On the talk.
Okay.
Two questions.
Other questions can come later. Okay.
So, ma'am, that actually when tomato was actually sent to America, they actually thought it was dangerous or poisonous.
Not North America, yeah.
Yes.
So USA is different from America.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
So basically, I did a lot of biology. So could it be that the indigenous people have thought that because generally in nature something if it is red it is generally very dangerous and poisonous. So people might have thought tomato because it is red it could be poisonous. Can there be relation of this thing? It can be.
Maybe, but I don't know
Okay.
why. I don't know
So-
why. But one thing to mention is also that the early tomatoes and brinjals as well, which is a relative, but not from the not from the Americas. They do have these kind of substances, but some people react very negatively to them. Allergic and sometimes stomach problems and so on. So it's possible that it had a real basis.
Okay, ma'am. The other question is generally, I came to know that tomato is actually called as a fruit, but not as a vegetable. So where do biologists, as you are on a large scale, draw the line between the fruit and the vegetable?
It's totally different, meaning there's no overlap I mean, there are overlaps, but not a continuous, it's not two sets that overlap. Okay, so fruits can be vegetables. Fruits can be what we call fruits. Fruits can also be dry things that we don't eat at all. So the fruit is what forms in a post-fertilization flower. The inner part, the ovary, matures into the structure that contains the seed, and that is a fruit, technically speaking. So when this kind of difference in this, definitions comes up, that there it is.
So because tomato has seeds in it, we consider it as a fruit. Is it what you are?
Because the way it forms from this lower part of the female structure, the gynecium, the ovary, and it contains the seeds in it. Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, roots can be vegetables. They are not fruit. So vegetables can be all kinds of things, leaves, stems, roots, etc. Fruit is only one thing. Whether you want to eat it like a fruit is a different matter. Okay.
So when you are talking about domestication of these plants or animals, like over the course of domestication, they change their forms.
Absolutely.
And like, is there any way to sort of deconstruct what an onion would have looked like back at 3rd century BCE?
Possibly. I don't know specifically about onions, but certainly in tomatoes, I know there's a lot of work that, So the reason why people sort of want to know more about wild relatives of cultivated plants is not because that's just the curiosity of knowing what they look like, but the idea that they would contain some kinds of properties that would be really good for us now, like disease resistance, that and the other. So the wild relatives receive a lot of attention. Now, in general, you can actually what's called reconstruct the traits on a phylogenetic tree using certain statistical methods to sort of infer from what we see today, what the fruit at that time might have looked like, or in the case the onion, what it might have looked like. I would say that the wild onion probably just looked like a green onion today. There's nothing much else happening there. It becomes fat or it doesn't. Yeah, no, I'm just saying. So just as far as onion is there, but that's a complete guess, this thing. So you can do that. So infer history of the trait, just as way you can infer history of a group of organisms. But equally, people have done that using genetic methods also. I can't off my head remember what exactly and so on, but people have done that and tried to actually reconstruct. I don't see what the joy is in that, but there it is.
Okay, you can add.
Since the origin of agriculture, or even indigenous peoples across continents have been actually they have been the first bioprospectors of various species for consumption, say, for example. Why bioprospecting is not moving ahead in this generation? We are not able to identify new food or species or anything like that, do new domestication.
So there are many things that come to my mind. Is that it? Is that okay? One is bioprospecting, I suppose, is a much larger, wider term. And usually someone like me would interpret it as, bioprospecting for particular chemicals, biochemicals and so on. So for drugs. As far as domestication, and then, you domesticate a creature whose properties you like. So yeah, why does that not happen? So bioprospecting in the first sense is definitely happening. That's what this whole thing of green gold was about. That, organisms, plants in different places have all kinds of properties that you want. And similarly, you want wild species because they have properties that you want to then incorporate in your cultivated species. So that is very much there. New species, I think, on the other hand, we've been very good at losing species that we used to use, and now have come to, I think, I can't even remember what it is, but it's a huge proportion that we've lost. So you can just go back to those old ones and domesticate those instead of, I don't know, but yeah. So people do try to sort of look at other new kinds of species, but I don't think that much effort goes into it. There's a little bit, of course, and there are very local places where people use plants or whatever that, most people, other people may not. And so those are definitely worth looking at and exploring further and making, domesticating them in the sense we think of. But, yeah. So one thing to remember is that in our process of agriculture, what we have done, not only, I'm not just talking about, recently we've lost many, many food plants because we used to get food gathered from the wild. It's very little done now, right? It's mostly from things that are cultivated. So I lost the thread of my thought. Yeah, so anyway, what I was going to,
Domestication.
yeah, no, it doesn't matter. I don't think it was very important. But what I meant to say was that there are many different properties, and plus, when you that's what I was. Large-scale agriculture has definitely been responsible for a lot of this reduction and varieties of, because it's just easier to buy it in the shop, right, than try to look at. Or, people don't, I mean, there are so many fruit here, like, like beer, the people, the small ones, you pick off the, people are too lazy to do that anymore. They don't want to pluck it off the little shrubs and eat it. Although if you're out there and, starving, I suppose you won't mind doing it, or it's just fun. But I'm just saying that we just want convenience. We just want to buy it in a package in a store. So that's the way it is. But yeah, anyway.
Okay, are there any questions?
Yes, you mentioned that human had two places of origin. So
No.
actually, it was like in some.
Can we go back?
Some part of Africa, it was also there.
No. Though that is cumin, the genus, but not cumin, the species. Can we go back? Okay, let me see. Then it needs to be warmed up a bit. Yeah. That was one of the. Okay. Okay, so this is the genus Cuminum. Okay, so yes, some species of Cuminum occurs here, but it's not the cumin that we eat. So the cumin that we eat has a continuous distribution in this part. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. So that will be the last question. After we find out.
Can I speak Tamil?
Yes, definitely. I may answer in English.
You will answer in Tamil also.
He will do that. Solunga.
நான் ஒரு தமிழ் poem சொல்றேன்.
Solunga.
Like அந்த poem வந்து என்னோட விஷயம் இருக்கு.
அது நீங்க தான் ட்ராஸ். என்ன இருக்குது? என்ன இருந்தது பாட்டு? ஓகே.
களவு காட்டுகிறது புதுமணல் பரப்பி பழந்தாழி பெரும் பெண்டிய கைப்பட்டு மணமக்களை கோரை அழகுற
வெஞ்சோறும் கரியும் நீங்கிய காலை நீங்கி இல்லறம் நடந்தால் மணப்பெண் தாரையின்றி நடந்த திருமணத்தில். இதுல வந்து போயிட்டு என்ன சொல்றாங்க அப்படின்னா, அந்த களவு வாழ்க்கை அப்படின்னு சொல்றது லவ் பண்ற ஸ்டேஜ் அதுதான் சொல்றாங்க. சோ வந்து அந்த லவ்ன்றது வந்து 2 மாசம் தான் இருக்கணும், அதுக்கு மேல நீடிக்க கூடாது, அதுக்கு அடுத்தது வந்து திருமண ஸ்டேஜ்க்கு வந்துடணும் அப்படின்னு சொல்றாங்க. அண்ட் சோ இதுல வந்து உணவை பத்தி பேசியிருக்காங்கல்ல, லைக் வெண்சோறும் கறியும் அப்படின்ட்டு. சோ வந்து அப்ப என்ன மாதிரியான மீட் யூஸ் பண்ணிருப்பாங்க அண்ட் ஆல்சோ ஸ்பைசஸ்.
கறினாக்கா at that time they meant pepper. இப்போ இது மிளகு, கறினா மிளகு. அப்போ அது கறி வாஸ் மிளகுக்கு கறிம்பாங்க. இல்ல அந்த கறி இல்ல ஐ மீன் மீட் உண்டு, பட் அப்போ அவங்க சாப்பிட்ட மீட் அதுல சிக்கன் பத்தி பேசின மாதிரி தெரியாது எனக்கு. பட் பெப்பருக்கு நிறைய ரெஃபரன்சஸ் இருக்கு. கறி ஐ மீன் மிளகுக்கு நிறைய யூசஸ். ஆமா, அப்புறம் அது கறியில போட்டதுனால கறியும்போம். அது இது. ஸோ அது ஒன்று. இன்னொன்று என்ன சொன்னீங்க, என்ன வெண்சோறு இருந்தது, அதான். அப்புறம் வேற என்ன, இல்லை நீங்க என்ன கறி யூஸ் பண்ணியிருப்பாங்கன்னு சொல்றீங்க, கறி ஆஸ் இன் த சென்ஸ் ஆஃப் மீட். அது ஸ்பெசிஃபிக்கா நான் ரெஃபர்ஸ் டு கறி, போர், வைல்ட் போர், கோட், இந்த மாதிரி தான் சில இது பார்த்துருக்கேன். ஆல்சோ மோஸ்ட் ஹண்டட் ஒன். ஸோ ரேபிட்ஸ், எஸ், தேங்க்யூ. அந்த மாதிரி இதெல்லாம் இருந்தது. பட் இது சிக்கனை பற்றி நாங்கள் ரெஃபரன்ஸ் பார்க்கல. ஸோ நிறைய இருந்திருக்கலாம், பட் அது சொல்லாததுனால இல்லைன்னு சொல்ல முடியாது. பட் ஸோ கறி இன் திஸ் கான்டெக்ஸ்ட் அது வந்து ஆக்சுவலாக மிளகு தான் அப்படின்னு தான் எனக்கு என்னோட அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்டிங்.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
We have come to the end. Now let us Aditya to propose the vote of thanks.
தேங்க்யூ. அது அணைச்சு இது பண்ணிடலாம்ல, அணைச்சுடலாம்.
Thank you, Dr. Geeta, for a very insightful lecture. I am sure that all of you have a mental appetite equal to the appetite for Chettinad Chicken. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
To generate